Vex'ora Nim hadn't expected much from her first day at the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences. As the only Nexilian to ever be accepted, scratch that. The only Nexilian to ever apply, she'd prepared herself for curious stares and awkward questions. What she hadn't prepared for was the overwhelming architectural monstrosity that was the Academy itself. "By the seven moons," she muttered, her four eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns of disbelief. The main campus hovered 300 feet above the surface of Centauri Prime, its crystalline spires and anti-gravity platforms connected by shimmering force bridges. Students of at least 12 different species bustled across these transparent walkways, many using appendages that Vex'ora couldn't even name. A holographic arrow materialized in front of her face. "Nexilian student Vex'ora Nim, please proceed to orientation," announced a disembodied voice that somehow managed to sound both polite and condescending. Vex'ora adjusted her environmental suit, a necessity given her species' unique biochemistry. Unlike most carbon-based lifeforms, Nexilians process nitrogen as their primary element. This required her to wear an unflatteringly bulky suit that recycled her breath and maintained the precise atmospheric mixture her body needed. The suit made a faint hissing sound with every movement, which she'd grown accustomed to but now felt painfully conspicuous. "Great," she sighed, following the floating arrow. "Nothing says blend in like looking like a walking pressure cooker with legs." The orientation hall buzzed with excitement. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and matter states congregated in groups, their translator badges occasionally glitching and releasing bursts of untranslated native languages. Vex'ora's four eyes, two large primary ones and two smaller secondary ones positioned above, scanned the crowd nervously. "You must be our Nexilian," came an enthusiastic voice. A tall, willowy being with iridescent skin floated toward her. "I'm Professor Lumina, Dean of Interspecies Relations. We're absolutely thrilled to have you. The genetic adaptability of Nexilians is legendary. Is it true your DNA can rewrite itself in response to environmental stimuli?" "Only partially," Vex'ora responded, her voice modulator translating her natural high-pitched frequencies into standard galactic common. "We can't shape-shift like the Morphians, if that's what you're asking. But yes, I can adapt to survive most toxic environments within a few hours of exposure, though I'd rather not demonstrate right now." "Fascinating." Professor Lumina clapped her translucent hands together. "And the rumors about your species' analytical capabilities?" Vex'ora shifted uncomfortably. "We're good with patterns, numbers, quantum probabilities. It's nothing special." This was a lie. Nexilians could mentally calculate faster than most shipboard computers, a talent that had made them valuable but reclusive members of the Galactic Alliance. Most species found Nexilians odd, and with their sudden trances as they processed complex calculations and their tendency to respond to questions that hadn't been asked yet because they'd already predicted the conversation's flow. "Well, your test scores certainly suggest otherwise. Highest marks we've seen in 50 cycles." Professor Lumina gushed before floating off to welcome other students. A small group nearby had fallen silent, watching the exchange. Vex'ora's secondary eyes caught their expressions while her primary eyes remained fixed on her orientation schedule. The tallest one, a Zentarian with metallic scales and prominent cranial ridges, whispered something that made the others snicker. "Hey, pressure cooker," he called out. "What's the probability of you making any friends here? I'll save you the calculation, it's 0. Vex'ora's suit gave a particularly loud hiss as she turned away, pretending not to hear. She'd come to the academy to learn, not to make friends. Besides, her predictive modeling skills had already calculated an 87.3% probability that the Zentarian would become a problem. She just hadn't predicted how big a problem. Not yet. 3 weeks into the semester, Vex'ora had established a routine. Wake up, adjust environmental suit settings, attend classes, retreat to her private quarters, repeat. The academy had thoughtfully provided her with a nitrogen-rich living space where she could remove her suit and breathe freely. It was the only place she felt comfortable. Her advanced quantum mechanics class was where everything started to unravel. Professor Quark, a gaseous entity contained in a hovering metal sphere, had assigned a group project. "Today we'll be calculating temporal displacement vectors," the professor announced, his containment sphere pulsing with each word. "I've assigned your groups based on complementary skill sets." Vex'ora's heart sank as the holographic assignments appeared. She was grouped with Drax, the Zentarian who'd called her pressure cooker on day one, and his two followers Mira, a crystalline Lumidian who could manipulate light, and Krell, a bulky Graviton with density-altering abilities. "Looks like we got stuck with the walking air tank," Drax smirked as they gathered at their workstation. His metallic scales caught the light as he moved, creating an intimidating shimmer. "Try not to explode, Nexilian. I hear your kind are unstable." "Actually, Nexilians are quite stable," Vex'ora replied evenly. "It's a common misconception based on a mistranslation of our biochemistry texts." "Oh, listen to the encyclopedia," Mira chimed in, her crystalline body refracting light in amusing patterns that spelled out nerd across the tabletop. "Maybe if you spent less time memorizing facts, you'd have learned how to look normal." Vex'ora's secondary eyes narrowed while her primary ones remained fixed on the assignment. "Let's just focus on the temporal displacement vectors." "Sure thing, freak show," Drax sneered. "Since you're so smart, why don't you do all the calculations while we supervise?" Temporal displacement vectors were complex, requiring thousands of calculations across multiple dimensions. For most species, it would take hours. For Vex'ora, it would take approximately 12 minutes of focused thought. "Fine," she said simply, and fell into a calculation trance. When she emerged, the equations were solved, but her group members had disappeared. Only their bags remained at the workstation. Vex'ora glanced at the time. Only 15 minutes had passed. She'd been faster than usual. That's when she noticed something was wrong with her suit. The environmental controls were fluctuating wildly. The temperature inside was rising, and her nitrogen levels were dropping. "Professor," she called out urgently, "I need to." "What's wrong, pressure cooker?" "Getting too hot." Drax appeared beside her, dangling a small device between his metallic fingers. "Looking for this?" "It's your suit's regulator. Fascinating technology. I was just examining it." Vex'ora's breath came in short gasps as her suit's backup systems struggled to compensate. Her vision began to blur. Without the regulator, she had maybe 10 minutes before toxic levels of oxygen would begin affecting her system. "Give it back," she wheezed, reaching for the device. Drax held it higher. "What's the magic word?" "The magic word is detention," came Professor Quark's voice from behind them. The gaseous professor's containment sphere hummed ominously. "Hand over the regulator immediately, Mr. Drax." Drax's smug expression faltered. He dropped the regulator into Vex'ora's outstretched hand. "We were just joking around, Professor. No harm done." "Report to the Dean's office," Professor Quark ordered. "MS Nim, are you all right?" Vex'ora quickly reattached her regulator, feeling the blessed rush of nitrogen-rich atmosphere filling her suit. "Yes, Professor." "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. As she watched Drax exit the classroom, his scales flashing with indignation, she calculated the probability that this incident would be the end of his harassment at 0.0087%. The system had failed her. Drax received 1 day of detention and a warning. His friends, Mira and Krell, claimed they had nothing to do with it and escaped punishment entirely. And the next day, when Vex'ora found her personal study materials corrupted with juvenile insults and her lab workstation sabotaged with materials caustic to her species, she realized this was only the beginning. The annual Interspecies Science Fair was the Academy's most prestigious event. Representatives from all major galactic corporations, military branches, and research institutions attended, scouting for talent and handing out life-changing internship opportunities. For Academy students, it was essentially a job interview with the entire galaxy. Vex'ora had spent 3 months perfecting her project, a theoretical model for nitrogen-based computing that could revolutionize AI systems. Her prototype utilized her own neural patterns as a blueprint, creating computational architecture that could process quantum probabilities intuitively rather than mathematically. "This is groundbreaking work, MS Nim," Professor Lumina had told her after reviewing her proposal. "If successful, You could change the fundamental approach to quantum computing. The night before the fair, Vex'ora stayed late in her lab space, running final diagnostics. Her 4 eyes were heavy with fatigue, but her excitement kept her going. This was her chance to prove that Nexilians had something valuable to contribute beyond their reclusive reputation. When she finally returned to her quarters, a message notification blinked on her terminal. "Don't embarrass yourself tomorrow, freak. Nobody wants nitrogen brain technology. Do yourself a favor and don't show up. Your concerned classmates." Vex'ora deleted the message. The bullying had become background noise at this point, unpleasant but expected. Her secondary eyes twitched with annoyance while her primary eyes focused on getting some rest. The next morning, she arrived early to set up her display. The grand exhibition hall hummed with activity as students arranged their projects under the massive crystal dome. Sunlight filtered through, creating rainbow patterns across the floor. It would have been beautiful if Vex'ora hadn't been so nervous. She reached her assigned table and froze. Her project, the prototype, the schematics, the presentation materials, everything was gone. In its place sat a crude nitrogen tank with googly eyes glued to it, and the words Vex'ora's brain painted on the side. "No," she whispered, her voice modulator crackling with distress. "No, no, no, no." She frantically searched under the table, behind neighboring displays, even checking her personal tablet to see if she'd somehow mixed up her location. Nothing. "Looking for something," came Drax's voice from behind her. He leaned casually against a pillar, flanked by Mira and Krell. "Where is it?" Vex'ora demanded, her suit hissing more rapidly as her breathing accelerated. Drax examined his metallic claws with exaggerated interest. "Where's what?" "That pile of junk you call research." Maybe it realized how worthless it was and threw itself out. "You had no right." Vex'ora's voice trembled, not with sadness but with fury. Her secondary eyes fixed on Drax while her primary ones continued searching the area. "That was 3 months of work." "Oh please," Mira chimed in, her crystalline body sparkling with mirth. "Like anyone would believe a Nexilian could create something worthwhile. We did you a favor. Now you won't humiliate yourself in front of the entire galaxy." Krell grunted in agreement, his massive body shifting density until he appeared to be made of stone. Primitive species should know their place. Something inside Vex'ora snapped. Not visibly, she remained perfectly still as her neural pathways fired in new patterns. In that moment, she ran 27,342 probability calculations simultaneously, considering every possible reaction and its consequences. She could report them, but previous experience proved the punishment would be minimal. She could rebuild her project, but not in time. She could plead for an extension, but that would only reinforce their perception of her weakness. Or she could do something else entirely. "You know," Vex'ora said with unnerving calmness, "on Nexilia, we have an ancient tradition for situations like this." The bullies exchanged glances, momentarily thrown by her composed response. "It's called the Proclamation of Grudge," she continued, her voice modulator shifting to a deeper, more formal tone. "When one Nexilian is wronged by another, they can formally declare a state of war." Drax snorted. "What are you going to do? Bore us to death with calculations?" Vex'ora's 4 eyes blinked in perfect synchronization for the first time since arriving at the academy. "I, Vex'ora Nim, hereby proclaim a formal grudge against Drax, Mira, and Krell. From this moment forward, we are at war." The bullies burst into laughter, drawing curious stares from nearby students. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, pressure cooker," Drax sneered, turning to leave. "Come on, guys. Let's go see some real science projects." As they walked away, Vex'ora's secondary eyes narrowed. They had no idea what they'd just started. Xenophysics was Krell's favorite class mostly because it required minimal thinking and maximum showing off of his density manipulation abilities. Professor Neutrina always used him to demonstrate gravitational principles, and he loved the attention. "Today we'll be exploring dimensional stability," Professor Neutrina announced. "Krell, would you mind assisting with a demonstration?" Krell lumbered to the front of the classroom, his massive form shifting from stone-like solidity to something more metallic. "No problem, Professor." Vex'ora sat quietly in the back row, her secondary eyes trained on Tom, who was stationed by the classroom's environmental controls. Mr. Gorvon had coincidentally scheduled maintenance on the dimensional stabilizers in this particular classroom the night before. "Now, Krell," the professor continued, "please demonstrate a standard density shift while I measure the dimensional displacement." Krell nodded, focusing as his body began to change, but as he shifted, something went wrong. The classroom's lights flickered. The dimensional stabilizers emitted a high-pitched whine. That's not supposed to happen," Professor Neutrina said, checking her instruments. Krell's eyes widened in panic as his body began to fluctuate uncontrollably between states of matter. Parts of him turned gaseous while others became hyperdense. "Professor, something's wrong." "And remain calm," Professor Neutrina said, though she looked far from calm herself. "It appears we're experiencing some sort of dimensional anomaly." That's when the holographic projectors tampered with earlier by Gorvon activated, displaying what appeared to be a dimensional rift opening behind Krell. It was completely harmless, of course, just a pre-programmed light show, but to Krell's panicked mind, it looked terrifyingly real. "No, not again." He screamed, his childhood trauma triggered, his control shattered completely, and he began shifting wildly through different density states. Students backed away as Krell's panic grew. Only Vex'ora remained perfectly still, observing through all four eyes, a subtle movement of her finger on her wrist controller making the rift appear to grow larger. "It's coming for me," Krell bellowed, now fully convinced he was being pulled into a dimensional void. In his terror, he lost all composure, shifting into a gaseous state and streaming toward the ventilation system to escape. Professor Neutrina hit the emergency shutdown, and the classroom stabilized immediately. But it was too late for Krell's dignity. The entire class had witnessed his breakdown, and the Academy's hyper-connected gossip network ensured everyone knew about it by lunchtime. Vex'ora calmly packed her things as the class was dismissed early. "Did you see his face?" Tom whispered as they left, when he went all gaseous and tried to escape through the vents. Phase 1 complete, Vex'ora responded coolly. "Krell's reputation as the fearless tough guy is compromised. His social standing will drop approximately 43% by tomorrow." "You're scary sometimes, you know that," Tom said admiringly. Mira was next. The crystalline Lumidian prided herself on her flawless light manipulation abilities and her physical perfection. She was scheduled to perform at the arts exhibition that evening, a light sculpture performance that she'd been practicing for weeks. "Are you sure about this one?" Tom asked as they prepared backstage. "It seems a bit harsh." "She destroyed 3 months of my research," Vex'ora reminded him, her voice modulator emotionless as she made final adjustments to a small device. "This will destroy 1 evening of her vanity. The mathematics of justice are clear." Mira's performance began with her standard entrance, a spectacular display of light refracted through her crystalline body, casting rainbow patterns across the auditorium. The audience gasped in appreciation. Then Vex'ora activated her device. A specialized harmonic wave completely inaudible and harmless to most species rippled through the theater. To Mira, however, it was like nails on a chalkboard for her crystalline structure. She faltered mid-pose, her perfect light patterns distorting. "What's happening?" she whispered, trying to maintain her performance as the harmonic wave intensified. Crystalline beings like Lumidians had one peculiar weakness: that certain frequencies could temporarily induce what they called clouding, a loss of their perfect transparency and refraction. And that's exactly what began to happen to Mira on stage in front of the entire Academy. Her gleaming body began to turn cloudy, like frosted glass. The beautiful light patterns she was projecting warped and dimmed. And most mortifying of all, the clouding was happening in irregular patches, making her look like a poorly maintained glass sculpture. The audience murmured in confusion. Someone snickered. Mira, realizing what was happening to her appearance, let out a horrified cry and fled the stage. 2 down. Vex'ora said quietly as they slipped out of the theater. "I'd want to go." By the end of the week, the academy was buzzing with rumors. Krell had requested a temporary leave of absence, citing medical reasons. Mira had locked herself in her quarters, refusing to emerge until her clouding completely subsided, and Drax, the ringleader, was furious. "You think you're clever, don't you?" He cornered Vex'ora in an empty corridor, his metallic scales bristling with anger. "I know you're behind what happened to them." Vex'ora regarded him with all four eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Drax snarled. "This is about that stupid grudge declaration, isn't it? Well, guess what? You're dealing with me now, and I'm not as easy to frighten as those two. I'm simply attending my classes." Vex'ora replied calmly, "Just like you should be doing." Drax leaned closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen carefully. Pressure cooker. I know people. Important people. One call from my father, and your precious scholarship gets revoked. One word from me, and you'll never work in any respectable research facility in the galaxy." Vex'ora's secondary eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm promising you," Drax hissed. "Back off now, or I'll make sure you regret ever leaving your backwater planet." Vex'ora checked her wrist computer. "Fascinating. You're exactly on schedule." "What?" "Art. Your threats. They're precisely what I calculated you would say, almost word for word." She tilted her head. "Do you know what the problem with your species is, Drax? You're predictable." Before Drax could respond, the Academy-wide announcement system crackled to life. But instead of the usual administrative messages, a recording began to play. It was Drax's voice. "Of course I sabotaged her project. You think anyone wants to see some nitrogen breathers work take the spotlight? My father donated the East Wing. I decide who succeeds at this academy." Drax's face went pale beneath his metallic scales. "What? How did you?" "I didn't," Vex'ora said simply. "You did, just now." The corridor's security cameras blinked their recording lights. Drax's confession, provoked by Vex'ora's careful maneuvering, had been broadcast to the entire academy. "You tricked me," he growled, lunging toward her. But Vex'ora had calculated this response too. She stepped aside smoothly, and Drax found himself face to face with Dean Lumina, who had coincidentally been making her rounds in this exact corridor. "Mr. Drax," the Dean said coldly, "I believe we need to have a serious conversation about your future at this institution." 2 hours later, Vex'ora sat in the Dean's office, her environmental suit hissing softly as she breathed. "While I cannot condone your methods," Dean Lumina said, "the evidence of ongoing harassment is overwhelming. Mr. Drax and his friends will face appropriate consequences." "And my science project?" Vex'ora asked. "You'll be granted an extension to recreate your work," the Dean confirmed, "and additional security measures will be implemented to prevent such sabotage in the future." Vex'ora nodded, satisfied. As she left the office, she found Tom and Mr. Gorvan waiting outside. "Operation Newton's third law is complete," Tom grinned. "Equal and opposite reaction delivered." "Not quite," Vex'ora said. "There's one more step." The next day, as Drax was clearing out his locker, his enrollment suspended pending review, Vex'ora approached him. The corridor fell silent as students watched the confrontation. "Come to gloat?" Drax muttered, not meeting her gaze. "No," Vex'ora replied. "I came to officially end the grudge." She held out a small device. "This contains my research on nitrogen-based neural interfaces. I think you'll find page 217 particularly interesting." Drax stared at her in confusion. "Why would you give me this?" "Because page 217 details how certain neural pathways, including those in Zentarian brains, can be rewired to overcome inherent biases." Vex'ora's four eyes blinked synchronously. "The proclamation of grudge isn't about destruction, Drax. It's about correction. On my world, when the grudge ends, both parties are expected to have learned something." She turned to leave. then paused. "You wanted to know what I'm capable of. Now you know. The question is, what are you capable of?" As Vex'ora walked away, her secondary eyes caught the thoughtful expression on Drax's face as he looked down at the device in his hands. 3 months later, when Vex'ora finally presented her rebuilt project at the Remedial Science Fair, she was surprised to find Drax in the audience. More surprising was the fact that he asked the most insightful question during the QA session. War, as it turned out, could sometimes lead to unexpected peace.